Okay, so I think actually the most interesting thing that I wanted to implement was a simple undo system here. So we're gonna do that now, in the hopes that I actually kind of know what I'm doing. So we'll need an undo stack in the future, but for now, basically, I'll change the way it works so that everything goes through these actions. So we've got like I think it's called editor place, which are our input actions. So whenever the editor place input action is fired, then what we're doing is we're trying to find the tile position that we're hovering, and then we're placing the entity there. And instead of doing this call right here, we'll instead basically instruct or create like an editor action. We'll say the kind is place, and the place data is then tile position. Previous entity is get. I guess get. Problem being, if this is out of bounds, then we'll run into trouble here. So cleanup, or let's actually say no check-in. Get fails if out of bounds, because we need to probably store like a default value if we're out of bounds or something. Tile position, and the new entity is editor.brush, and then we'll basically just say do action editor action, and that will then do this. So we'll have a big ass. Dude, I need to figure out like an ordering for this. Basic editor interaction. Dude, I keep forgetting, what is my divider comment? Basic editor interaction. Yes, there we go. I'd forgotten what I actually called that. I don't know, I probably need to reorder some of this. This is not a good name for that. Tile map handling, we'll call it. Dude. Divider comment, tile map handling. And then we'll have editor interaction. So this all goes into time map handling up there. We'll have drawing, and we'll have save and load. Then this is kind of an helper that we can actually put into panels. Right, do action is obviously missing yet. So we'll do that in a second. So we'll have do action, which takes in the client, the editor, and then the action. I don't know. Oh shit, yeah, I deleted that. I don't know if that should be called action or maybe change. I think change is actually the better word for this. I think we also want changing brush as a change. Now we can basically implement that logic here. So we'll say whenever we are placing something, we'll have to do this logic that I forgot what that is. It was very simple, but editor place is basically these few lines of code here. Action place. So this is action new entity. And yeah, right, so this is basically what this actually should be. It should be do change forwards, right? Because we need to revert that. And that's action place new entity. This is action place tile position. This should be called tile position. Then for the remove, I think we can actually copy that from here. Except for this is actually in there, so we'll have a similar thing where we construct our change and say this the kind is remove and the remove is tile position and get editor tile position. And again, this will fail. So we'll need to think about a solution for this and then do action forwards, editor. Right, it's actually called do change forwards. And there we check, hey, if we're in bounds, then put account entity there. Action remove. Not action, it should be called change. Change remove. That one. should also be called tile position. And then action. It's going to be called change, and we'll need to pass in the client here. And so now it should still work the same as before. So we'll try that out. So if I select, I don't know, bedrock, I can place these. So that's good. But if I press here, then we're gonna crash, yeah. And so we'll probably write just a safe wrapper here, where we will check if position in bounds, return get, otherwise just return me a default entity. And this will be get our default, get our default. Okay. So far, so good. Yeah, so there's going to be a few problems with this for now, but we'll try to work around those. So first of all, we only actually want to do this change if there will actually be a change, right? So we'll check for the existing, get our default. And if this existing is not the editor brush, only then will we do the change. Otherwise, if we keep holding our mouse button down on an entity that we already placed, then there's going to be unnecessary changes registered where nothing actually did change. So we want to prevent that. And this is probably called entity kind. And we'll do the same thing for this. Actually, I'm thinking this remove, honestly, is just us brushing count as the entity kind, right? So we can actually not have to do that. That was in English, but you know what I'm saying. So we'll do a do place change, or like just place change, whatever. Or just place, honestly. With the brush. And I think all the other parameters we can actually just get from there. So we get the tile position, we'll get the existing. If that is not the same as brush, then do this. And so in here, if we're placing, so if we're holding down left click, then we actually want to place editor the brush. Otherwise, we want to place count, because count represents empty. And then remove doesn't exist. So the only difference is that basically resizing the world should behave differently, but that's a problem for another day. Okay, so that still works for now. That also works, which is surprising. Okay, so far so good. So there's, okay, let's firstly implement this shrinking of the world, because I'm kind of scared of that. So, or not scared, but we need to implement that. So what I can do is I've got this world, and I can modify that to some extent. So I can draw in here, whatever. But it could also happen, obviously, that I want a bigger world than just this. So what I can do is I can select something and then just paint over there. And the world size will increase. And in theory, I haven't actually tested this, but it seems to work that I can basically do this for as long as I want. Now, what I also want to happen, obviously, is if I remove this, then this section, which is now empty, should disappear. But that's not yet implemented. And I think there's actually two problems with this. Firstly, oh no, that actually doesn't happen, which is curious. Why does that not happen? Oh, because the brush is, okay, but no, wait, what? So if I press right click on there, it doesn't actually resize, which obviously is the expected behavior in a sense, but it's, oh no, it actually does make sense, because there's no entity at this location and we're trying to place no entity, so to say. So it realizes like, hey, that wouldn't change anything. Which is interesting. Okay. Anyway, so if we're in here, we now need to check replace the entity at the target position in the tile map, and now we want to auto shrink the tile map if the latest section is completely empty. And for that, we will now need a special check. Which will be is latest section empty. And we'll do a while editor section count is bigger than 1 and is latest section empty. Resize. I mean, we could, actually we could do, we'll do a different thing. We'll check the get furthest entity x coordinates. And then that'll be our highest section number, which I think is honestly just highest x divided by section width plus 1. And then if editor, if highest section number is less than editor section count, then resize editor highest section number. And here we'll just go through all of these. Editor section count times that. The highest x will be 0. Actually, I guess it should be -1. I think, but I'm kind of scared of a negative number here because I think that's gonna misbehave with this value and whatever. Because we always want at least one section to display because no section doesn't make sense. So we'll use 0 here. And if get xy entity count is not count, then highest x is max, highest x, x. Nope, not what I meant to do. So if I now select bedrock and I draw over there and I draw even more, then it'll lead this and this and then this, and then it shrinks to whatever is the smallest thing. Okay, I sure hope that it's actually like freeing memory under the hood and whatever. That's also something that I wrote down that I actually want to do. Like get some inside information into the editor system. But I mean, this seems to be behaving the way that I want it to behave. So good enough. And so the cool thing is now that we can actually what we'll do first is we'll also implement this change brush thingy. Previous brush is entity kind and new brush is entity kind. Then we've got the select brush method somewhere, which basically does what we want already. So we'll have another change, and the change kind is going to be change brush. Previous brush is editor brush. And honestly, this info message should now be down here. And then we'll do change forwards, client, editor, change. And this is now very simple. This is just editor brush is change brush, new brush. And you might wonder, like, why is this a good idea? Because this is a lot more work to implement. It's kind of confusing to understand and whatever. And that is all true. I'm just checking if that still works. And that seems to be the case. But we can now start tracking these changes, and we can do a change reverse. Where I will basically go copy that. Here we will say previous brush. This one I'm actually not totally sure about. I think this is just previous entity. This will need to be auto grow the tile map. Actually, auto growing is already implemented, so isn't this literally just the same? Hold on. Can we even do something cooler than this? I think we can actually save us the copy pasting here and do a before is 0, after is 1. And then we'll have a entity, I don't know, entity. And we'll have a brush. And then we'll do a applied is editor change direction, which is an enum before and after. Editor change direction count, just so that it's clear where this value comes from. This is the editor change direction. And then instead of saying new brush and old brush, we will say brush applied, or I don't know, direction. And the same goes for this. We'll reference direction, sorry, entity direction. We'll do, honestly, we'll do a different check here. Hold on, I just need new music. But we'll say, okay, so the destination or target section number is change place tile position.x, and then we'll inline that to be more readable. So if the target section number is less than that, no, if it's actually bigger than this, then we'll resize. Then we'll put the entity into the tile map. This will be entity direction, and then we'll shrink in case it's necessary. Obviously, we could be kind of smart here to be like, well, if we just grew, then we probably don't need to shrink, but who cares? And this is brush is editor.brush as the previous value and brush as the new value. And then do change forwards doesn't exist anymore. Instead it's do change and after. We might want to rename those to be, instead of before and after, we might want to use forwards and backwards or whatever, but and this is an array of existing, and that's the new one. No type for the struct literal could be inferred from the context. Right, because this is wrong. And then it's also supposed to be do change after. Okay, does this still work? It seems that it's working. Okay, so that's good. That's progress. And what we now need to do is we'll keep track of the changes. So that'll be a dynamic array of editor change. Which is going to use the editor allocator. And instead of calling do change, we'll rename this to be apply change, and then register. Good question. We'll have like register change, I guess. Or like, I don't know. this will okay, this won't take a pointer, just to be less confusing. And then what we'll do is we'll copy that value into the changes, and we'll apply the change directly right. So that again should not change anything for the actual yep, that seems to work. But we're getting ever closer now to a functioning undo system. So we'll add a new UI panel, do the undo panel. Let me just yank that code. We'll just do something very ugly just to like figure out if our input, if our editor changes are actually registered correctly. Changes I, and we'll use UI label, left align label, and we'll just print out the entire change and just see what happens. We crash immediately. Palette panel. So this will be the UI, sorry, not the UI. Dude, what am I doing? It's a bad day today. Undo. I don't know. I'm sure there's a better way for this, or a better name for this. No idea what to call this in German. So I'm just gonna stick to undo for now. This should be my panel. So I now have a very small undo panel there, which should be placed on the left. But if I actually start, yeah, so we can already see there's our first action, which is of kind change brush. Unfortunately, it's too big to actually be displayed on screen. And that is also interesting. So I can still crash the thingy, which is not good. Okay, that doesn't work excellently. So we'll do a complete kind here. And if it's a place, then we'll do UI label on change.place. So we definitely obviously want cooler display here of what has actually changed. This will be change.brush. Honestly, this shouldn't be called change brush because the change is already in play, or like encoded in the fact that this is an editor change. So that seems unnecessary. And then we can also probably save us this. And then we don't need this double brush thingy. brush. This is brush. Dude, if I could just learn how to type. And then we'll do the panel on the left. So it's empty, that's fine, but as soon as we actually change something, then we can see, okay, it changed from count to bedrock. Now it changed from bedrock to slime hole, whatever. And if I start painting stuff, we can see the tile position is 9, 0. The entity is, it went from coal, sorry, from nothing to coal. If I now put a crystal over there, it's from coal to crystal. Okay, so this seems to work. So we'll have, for now we're going to use buttons for this, but we obviously want input actions in the future. This is going to be a horizontal container. If UI button, we use percentage of parent. Undo. Right, let me just make sure that the UI shows up correctly. So we'll need more localization for this. Editor, undo. I don't know, redo. So I've got my two buttons now. Those are smaller than I anticipated. Which means we will push a width of, I don't know, 300 for this entire window. And then we'll just basically need to ensure that the text here will fit into this width. But that's possible because we can also use multiple lines and whatever. Right, we're still crashing. We need to fix that. Let me just make sure that if we press those buttons, right, then we see, okay, undo, redo. Let's maybe just put a tiny divider in between those. Then they don't fit into the window anymore because this is wrong. Right. I don't actually know. I feel like undo should be on the right. I don't know why. Just a gut feeling. And let's just do like a slightly improved content of this panel. So if we change brush, we're just going to say center label changed brush. I'm not going to localize all of those yet. Then we'll display before and after. And if change place, if that is like, if we remove this, then we will say removed entity will only print out place entity after. We'll print out the position as well. What? Got one argument instead. Oh, very nice. That is what Felix implemented recently. That's cool. Okay, that's almost. This should be the entity kind. We don't want this one anymore. Okay, and we probably only want to actually display the latest thing that changed. So we'll say instead of that, honestly, let's just only do this panel if anything changed. Like if we have changes to account, then we can assume editor changes to account max1, which is not quite right. Like we actually want to have like a separate head, or I don't know, some index into this array. But yeah, now we can see, okay, what changed recently. And then next up we'll have a change, I don't know, next change index. Whenever we do a change, what we'll do is we'll there is array remove range? There is. First to remove is editor next change index. Last to remove is editor changes count. Then we'll add that. And this will be the editor next change index. Or actually, let's call this current change index so that it's less confusing. Current change index. And we crash. That's good. Why did we crash? Where did we even crash? In array remove range. Okay, so if we only want to do that if the current change index is less than I guess that. Okay, so far so good. And then if we'll have our do undo, because again, we also want to do that based on a keyboard binding. That could happen, so we'll factor this out. And here we will again check, like, hey, is the editor current change index actually less than the editor changes the count, just to be safe. And if so, then we want to apply the change, array get pointer, editor changes. But we want to apply that in reverse, right? So we'll apply the before, and then we'll decrease this current change index. And we also need to check, hey, is this actually at least 0? And then we'll do the redo. This should actually be maybe active button, which checks for basically this condition. And this is also a do maybe active button, which I think checks the same. And this will be do redo, which is going to be very similar, except for we want to do after, and we want to increase this. And I think I got, like, I'm not sure if this is correct. I think this is actually incorrect, but we'll figure that out. Okay, now I'm gonna be very curious. So we're selecting a brush, and then we're gonna place like a rock just down there. So if I press redo, then we'll crash because that's not supported, because there's nothing to redo. Right, because we're at the top of the thing. So what we'll have to check here is, hey, is there actually one more change after the one that I'm currently looking at? Which does it? Wait, I'm confused. I'm confused about the naming thing. So the current change is basically the, it shouldn't be called current change. I think it should be called latest change. So whenever we are and what do we want to check? We want to make sure that I think this, do we actually need a check here? No, I think we do, because we want to check, like, we can only redo a change if it is wait, I'm so confused about this. So basically what I'm seeing is the latest change that I did, and I can only undo that change. So redo for now doesn't even make sense. So we'll just not bother thinking about that for now. This is our latest change. Right, so just comment that out. Let's just implement undo for now. So whenever I'm changing the brush and now I place an entity, I want to undo that. So what will happen? We'll look at the latest change that we did, which is the one that we're displaying here, and we'll apply that in reverse order, and then we'll decrease the latest change. So we'll do undo. Bedrock is gone, and now the latest is this change of brush. And I think we're gonna crash now, but I can do undo. Yeah, we'll crash. Because this latest change index would now be -1, which honestly it should be from the beginning, because if changes is 0, then yeah. And I guess what we'll do is in this undo panel, we'll check here if editor latest change index is bigger than -1. Otherwise, we'll just say hold on, but we can still do redo, no? I'm so confused about redo right now. I don't know why, but so we'll say center label, no changes done. So it will tell me, okay, I didn't do any changes. Now I changed brush, so I can do undo. Now there's no more changes to be undone. And then we crash again. What? I'm confused. Why does this break? So I can do one change, I can undo that one, which means now the latest change index is -1 again. And so if I do this, then we'll crash. Because this is -1, so that's no good. We're still crashing. Why? Array index out of bounds. Because this last to remove is supposed to be less than count, so that's -1. Okay. So far, so good. Okay, so that seems to be kind of working. Actually, let's test this as well with like actually placing stuff. So I'm gonna place some bedrock on the left, and then I'll place some lava over there. So I can undo each of these lava tiles, and then it's gonna change back to the bedrock brush, and then I can undo all of those and whatever. Okay. So far, so good. What is the last thing that I actually committed? So now about the redo. Let me just think about this. Because I think we actually want to redo the latest change index +1. Is that a thing? So if I change this brush, it's gonna tell me, well, I can't redo that action. That's fair. If I do now select the crystal, then I can undo this one. But actually I want to redo the latest action that I just undid, right? So this is kind of misleading. Do we actually want to have two separate displays here? We basically want to show on the left, hey, this is the latest thing that you did that you can undo. And on the right, it's like, hey, this is the last thing that you undid that you can redo. Okay, let's do some research on this, because I know that Jonathan Blow implemented this in his editor. I don't know how the UI looks. And so we'll try to find him playing around with the editor. There's one. This is 6 years old, but it's gonna do for now. So he says undo, change 0, whatever. Okay, can he actually undo some stuff? That's not him undoing stuff. Okay, he's gone. Okay, there's undo, change 14. Undo, change 10. So he's gonna undo some stuff. Okay, there stuff happened. So currently it says remove the cube. I'm guessing this is basically undo, this is redo. And so there is like a small time frame where there's that I just missed again. I'm wondering, because there's change 11 in there. So change 11 is added cubes. Change 12 is remove the cube. Okay, because God knows what he did. But so this doesn't tell us about redo. It only tells us about undo. Although I am guessing that you can also redo stuff from this panel. Also, I might be I might re-auto those again. Okay, but before we do that, let's just check if this actually works as I expect. So I'm basically changing from left to right here. So if I undo this, it will go back to 0, or the first one. And I can't redo now. Okay. So that'll be... So here we'll check, hey, what? And there we'll check, is this less than editor changes account? Because I think what we actually want to do, we basically want to take the next change. Welcome and thank you for following. That's what I meant to say. And that came out way wrong. But how are you doing? Okay, no changes, yes. And then I go there, and I can undo that, and then I go there, and whatever. That, to me, seems to work, except I can't undo anything here. So this button should be grayed out. No? No, it shouldn't, right? Because I can undo this action. That's cool. And so if we don't have any changes, we'll just undo. We'll just print an empty line here basically so that the window size or window height doesn't read size whenever. Okay, and let's make sure that if we now go to the top and we draw some stuff, then I can undo that and I can redo that. And if I now go in here and start painting, then this is the history. So this is working as intended, which is honestly surprising. Cool. Oh, right, for the... We should probably have like a consistent number of lines per thingy, so we'll do change place entity. Cool. Okay, so there's, again, multiple things that we need to do. Firstly, we'll hook up some buttons to this. Sorry, some key bindings to this. Because Ctrl Z is just the way to go. And we might also want to think about grouping changes. So basically, if I paint stuff, right? If I go in there and I select bedrock and then I'll paint stuff, I probably want this to be a single undo, instead of having to undo every single one, which is just convenient. So we might want to think about that. But maybe that's also an issue for another day, because that could also just be overkill, to be honest, for what we actually need. And I think there's more important stuff to do first. And so I should be able to go into the input bindings, and there is register all input bindings, and you can say editor undo is key code with mod Ctrl Z, and then we'll have R for redo. And in the editor itself, we obviously need to react to those input bindings. So if, honestly, that can go into the same chapter. Input action fired globally. That is very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, and I think that's all I'm gonna do for undo redo for now. Right, let me just make sure this also works correctly with resizing the world. Yep, seems good. Awesome.